Twisted Metal in general is very iconic. Um, really big back in the '90s. Recently got its own television series on Peacock, and I've heard mixed things about it, but mainly good things about the television series for Twisted Metal on Peacock. And we haven't really seen a major entry in the series in over a decade. I don't even know exactly how long it's been, but I remember how hot Twisted Metal was back in the '90s, and out of all the games that came out, because there wasn't too many mainstream games that came out or main entry games that came out. Um, a lot of people would go on record and say that either Twisted Metal 2 or Twisted Metal Black was the best. As far as the '90s is concerned, I'd say Twisted Metal 2 was probably the best. And and it was a game that people played like crazy. A lot of people liked various things about it, like the co-op gameplay mode, along with the fact that you had to deal with like the final bosses in the game. You had to deal with the likes of Dark Tooth, and you had to deal with Minion and Sweet Tooth and all that. And Twisted Metal back in the day was a lot harder than it looked. It was very fun, especially if you were a guy, because it was nothing but violence and mayhem and all that. You got to race in different parts of the world, whether it be Paris, New York City, whether it be Holland or Hong Kong. And it feels like the vehicular combat genre had just died out like during the 2000s for the most part. And after Twisted Metal Black, it doesn't seem like Sony has done anything really big with the Twisted Metal series aside from the television series that's on Peacock right now. And it's been almost 30 years since Twisted Metal 2 was released, and I believe the game is going to be celebrating its 30-year anniversary in 2026, because I believe Twisted Metal 2 came out sometime in 1996 for the PS1. And I'm honestly shocked that we never necessarily got like a remake for Twisted Metal 2 for like the PlayStation 4 or anything like that. And it really begs the question whether or not, Sony should consider remaking Twisted Metal 2, considering the fact that it's a cult classic. I mean, the whole, Twisted Metal trilogy in general are considered cult classics for the most part, but it just feels like, I don't know, it feels like if Sony had brought that back, like if they decide to remake the trilogy, I'm pretty sure it would easily break over 1 million in terms of sales. And we don't have too many vehicular combat games in general nowadays, because that genre is just it's dead in the water for the most part. But I feel like if Sony brought back Twisted Metal, it would be a big deal. You know what I mean? Because you look at Twisted Metal 2, even though it had co-op, gameplay mode, basically once you beat like the story, like in co-op mode, it's like there's no ending. And I think that was one of the few things about Twisted Metal 2 that was kind of a bummer. But the gameplay itself was great. Twisted Metal 2 wasn't meant to be like heavily story driven like Twisted Metal Black was. And if Sony brought back or remade Twisted Metal 2 and made it more story driven, that would be very interesting. And I do feel that if Sony were to do anything with Twisted Metal in general, now would be the time, because it seems like now the series is getting a little bit of mainstream attention now, especially considering how popular it is on Peacock right now. But I'm not entirely sure whether or not Sony has any interest whatsoever on bringing back the Twisted Metal series, because there's no guaranteeing that it's going to take off if Sony like remade a classic like Twisted Metal 2 or Twisted Metal Black. But honestly, I do feel that Twisted Metal 2 was a game that holds a special place in many people's hearts, and I'm pretty sure many people would love to see Sony remake that for the PlayStation 5 or the Xbox Series X or PC. But Sony is not necessarily going to give the green light on that unless they know for a fact it's going to be profitable. And it seems like they're more invested in games like, Marvel's like Spider-Man 2, along with the God of War game that just came out. It seemed like they're focusing more on the here and now and the stuff that's really profitable in this day and age, opposed to going all the way back in time and remaking games. So a Twisted Metal 2 remake sounds awesome in theory, but in reality, I'm not exactly sure whether or not Sony has any interest on actually doing that.